Hello, everyone. This is Amy. As Mary Kay said, I am not able to use my video camera, but I am here. And as if you've been to any of our community conversations before, you've heard this summary about our project. And so we've shortened it a little bit and want to share with you some things also for the future of our project. But just so you know, bilingual Montessori came about out of discussions and struggles that our founding partners kept hearing about how to best integrate bilingual education into Montessori schools effectively. And this photo is from the Lead Montessori Conference open space session in Prague in 2019. This was one of those discussions, and we feel that it is the origin of bilingual Montessori. From here, we applied for and received a 3-year grant to support our project, and we launched bilingual Montessori in February of 2022. So the target groups, as you can see on the screen for our project, is showing the Montessori guides, second language teachers, and school leaders. Our approach comes from the whole school perspective as we work with the specific needs of these groups that make up a whole school. So keeping these groups in mind, we are developing the grant outcomes in 3 different areas. First, you may have heard about, we are creating a design process field guide that will share effective classroom and administrative practices from Montessori schools and second language acquisition information for supporting the goal of bilingual education. Second, we will be offering a 3-level online training course based on this field guide for those wanting to build or improve a bilingual Montessori school with support. And third, we are creating a community for all of us to engage, practice, and support each other through different activities, such as this community conversations, our social media groups, and our website. And this is our team. You've had the chance to meet all of us during the previous 8 community conversations, and we're all working on the outcomes that we just discussed. Also, each one of you are all part of our journey, and we've really enjoyed getting to know everyone through emails, on Facebook, and through the community conversations. And we just want to remind you to keep in touch with us and let us know your needs and any of the feedback you have on the project, because we love hearing from you and having your involvement. So now I will pass the word to Mary Kay, who will share with you more about the future of our project.
Yeah, so this is our last community conversation for the school year. So we will be resuming in the fall. So we just want to give you, first of all, review what we've done during these months with the community conversations. Next slide, please. So there's a beautiful slide that actually Lucie herself created for us. And it's a nice reminder of everyone who has joined us and shared their expertise. And so we're going to be sharing this summer and encouraging people who maybe didn't have time to hear certain talks. You'll have the chance in the summer to go back and listen and catch up. And then towards the end of the summer or beginning of September, we'll announce the schedule for probably not just for the fall, but for the coming school year. I can give you a sneak preview that a couple of these people who spoke before are going to be coming back and speaking about another area of expertise. We'll still be using this Wednesday 4 to 5:30 slot. The frequency we're still discussing. And obviously you can subscribe to our newsletter or check our website to make sure you don't miss the first session in the fall. So another thing that we've been working hard on is a series of 10 webinars. They're being pre-recorded right now, and the idea is that they'll be posted also sometime in the fall. So there are 10 different topics, some of much more general interest, which we hope will be useful for parents. Other ones that are more specifically geared towards people working in the classroom with the children, whether they're guides or language specialists. And then others, there's one in particular for school leaders, but we're hoping that the different ones can be of interest to people for different reasons. So anyway, so that's going to be another thing to look for in the fall. Next slide, please. And then looking way ahead, well, maybe not that far, to 2024, you will see the digital publication of this design process field guide, which we are working very hard on. Our goal is for June 2024. And then in October, November, is when we hope to launch the online course. So those are big milestones for us, big objectives that are part of our grant, which is why we mention them frequently to you. So 2024 is going to be very important in terms of the work of the grant and wrapping a couple of the big components up. And then our final event related to the work of our grant is we're going to have our first bilingual Montessori conference. This will be January 16th to 18th, 2025. It will be online and on site in the Czech Republic. So obviously you'll be hearing more, but if you want to save the dates, make a note now. And it'll be very exciting. We'll get to meet some of you in person that we haven't actually met in person, and just gather online as well. So looking forward to that. And now we will move to today's speaker, who is a member of our team, Lucie I've been practicing Urbančíková, is a member of our team. She is a language specialist, an English language specialist, but has expanded her skills because she's also teaching Czech to Czech students and as a foreign language. She has been working for the last 5 years at the Andilek Montessori School in Prague. Before that, she had worked for 14 years as an English as a second language teacher in different formats. And since she's been at Andilek, she has been given the responsibility. Is in the classroom with elementary and adolescent children, and she's also become the language coordinator for the school across all of the developmental planes. And they have from 3 years old till to adolescence. They also have. Lucie has a master's degree in experiential education, which obviously is very helpful for this work in a Montessori school. And she also has TEFL, TOEFL, TEAL certificates. She has, since she started working in the school, she has basically done all of the AMI assistance courses for each age group. And she is someone who's constantly training. She's always doing some new training. Although I think now we've taken up more of her extra time work for the grant, so maybe she's taking a little break. But she's definitely one of the lifelong learners that we enjoy having with us here. So in the talk, I won't say too much, but she really wanted to share her observations and eureka moments that has helped her feel successful in making English accessible to elementary children in the particular context that they have in Prague, which she'll tell you more about. And one of her challenges when she joined the school was that she had to create her own materials, because since she didn't have Montessori training, the guides preferred that she didn't use the Montessori materials. And so she has done a lot of work in designing materials, so that she's going to share with us her whole process. And I'll mention it now, but she also has prepared a handout. So a lot of what she talks about, she has summarized really nicely in a handout that you'll get after the talk when we send out the recording, that the recording is ready. So I'm looking forward to sharing this time with Lucie seeing the guidelines that she's going to extract from her experience and share with all of you who face these challenges in your own environments. So thank you so much, Lucie, for agreeing to do this talk.
Thank you, Mary Kay. Hello, everyone. I just wanted to say before I start the presentation that when I was offered the opportunity to present on the topic of creating learning and teaching materials, I was thrilled, because this is what my passion is. And I can say that I have quite a few wide range of passions in terms of working with children, but this is really like the top. So thank you for the opportunity. And here we go for the presentation. As we start, I want to just emphasize what is the core of today's talk for me is the independent work of children outside the L2 presentations. The reason why I emphasize it so much is that this topic of learning materials or the independent work of children outside the presentation is such a small field. At the same time, it's so intertwined with all the other aspects in the classroom. So I will be mentioning some areas which interconnect with this topic that I feel important they're mentioned, but the main focus of this talk today will be on the independent work of children. So what I will share, what is my experience and what I learned about the process of creating the materials for the children at our school. Mary Kay introduced me very thoroughly in terms of the general experience I have in the field of education, but I just would like to pinpoint some areas which I find very important for the topic today. And as I like visuals and parallels, I chose this amoeba, which is a monocellular organism, which has these parts called pseudopods, and they kind of reach out and decide whether they like being there, or if not, they retract. And these are the areas which formed me in terms of my work in the field of bilingual Montessori, is the teaching experience. As Mary Kay mentioned, that I've been teaching English actually as a foreign language for the last 14 years. And before coming to Montessori classroom 5 years ago, so that's more than that. But the reason why I emphasize the foreign language, I realized that about 2 years ago, the huge difference between teaching a second language and a foreign language. When I started teaching Czech to students whose first language is not Czech, and the difference between teaching Czech in the Czech environment and English in the Czech environment, I mean, there are very different tools that I have available. And on top of that, last year, I started teaching Czech as a first language to Czech students. So having this opportunity really opened up my understanding of the different tools that I have available for working, even though it may be only 2 languages, but they're always different context, and that different context gives me or requires me to use different tools. Then assessment, and especially formative assessment, and pretty much daily work with that has definitely been crucial for creating new learning materials. Mentoring or educational coaching in some areas. This is not only very handy for me in the position of language coordinator at our school, but also working with children, because the way the questions are asked, the way the students are led in the sessions are very handy to have some other tools. Bloom's taxonomy of educational goals and scaffolding. If you've never heard these terms before, I will mention them later on, but I wanted to point them out here because those are 2 things out of many, but 2 key things I rely on as well. Visual facilitation and sketchnoting. When I started working in the elementary, I realized that as opposed to 3 to 6 environment, where the goal, at least the way I see it, is to make language tangible for 6 to 12 and also for the adolescent, is how to make it visible. So because language in general is something untangible, so I'm trying to visualize and help them to understand the systems of the language. Curriculum building, training, and experience. This is something very specific to the Czech setting, but because we are a school that's registered under the Czech government, that we have to follow the rules set by the Czech Ministry of Education, and each school has to create its own curriculum based on guidelines that are set for the whole country. And being able to see the learning process from like the top, that also helped me with creating the individual learning materials, how they fit into the big puzzle. And last but not least is my previous experience in creating language materials, because the time Mary Kay mentioned, I've been teaching English before coming to the Montessori setting. Also been creating materials as well. And I find this experience very handy because I've learned the hard way already. And here in the Montessori setting, I can just use this experience. And this part right here at the bottom, again, going back to the amoeba, the way it eats, that whenever there's an object that would like to kind of try out if it's something edible, it kind of wraps the object and then sucks it in. And what on my to-do list, as Mary Kay said, that yes, I am a lifelong learner, and this is on my to learn list or to work more consciously with, is the educational neuroscience principles. Hearing about it at the AGM conference about 2 months ago was very inspiring, and I realized that some of the things I kind of realized myself by observing the children. And I'm not saying that I'm so smart that I don't need to learn more about it, but I realized how important it will be or how helpful it would be for my work and for the students if I gain more experience in this area. So my favorite quote: everything works somewhere, but nothing works everywhere. And the reason why I mention it here is that for today's talk, I think it's true more than anything else, because we work in different settings, different contexts. So the fact that when I say that it works for us at our school, it does not mean that taking it as a package and using it at your school is the only way to do it, or is the way to do it. So just take this, everything I'll share, as an inspiration And I have an analogy. When someone says, my knee hurts, what do you tell them? Well, just put, I don't know, just put your feet up and put something cold on it. But very rarely people ask, what happened? Because there can be different situations. Well, it can be a bruised knee, it can be a sprained knee, twisted, whatever. And the reason why I mentioned this analogy is that I hear these questions all the time in the field of bilingual Montessori, is that how do you teach reading? How do you teach writing? And the answers keep coming, but the context is not there. And sometimes I know that people who are not necessarily that experienced and ask the question, for example, how do you teach reading in your setting? They're so eager for any help and any information. They just take it and apply it. So, but it's not necessarily the best way. So that's therefore I find it crucial to know the context. And really briefly, to mention the context where I work, the context at the country level. Czech Republic in Central Europe. We are a monolingual country where Czech is the only official language. We are a country with the best dubbing in the world, which is a great privilege, but at the same time does lots of harm in terms of acquiring other languages because everything is dubbed. So really Czech is the only language you get to hear from the media. English language is mandatory from 3rd grade on. That's a state law. And it's 3 times 45 minutes per week.
And how long has that been mandatory, Lucie? English 3 times a week?
That has been mandatory for at least 10 years, I would say, because it used to be 5th grade on. But then actually initially it was Russian 5th grade on. After the Velvet Revolution in '89, it was switched to English. Actually there was English and German then, and eventually it was English only. And
that's just curious how long.
And the state requirements are lined up with the mandate with the CEFR levels for 5th grade to reach level A1, 9th grade reach level A2, and the end of secondary education, what we call the maturita, is a B1 level. The school level, Mary Kay mentioned a lot already, but just really briefly. We are a Czech Montessori school striving for bilingualism in the BICS, means the basic interpersonal communications at that level. We have 4 environments, the toddlers, CASA, lower elementary, and adolescents. And for the first 2 environments, we have the balanced dual language model. And actually, 4 months ago, we had inspection from the Czech Ministry of Education, and they said, your programs are bilingual, the way we see it from our definition. So that was a very interesting information we did not expect to hear.
And just to be clear, a balanced dual language model means that each classroom has an English speaker and a Czech speaker?
Yes, where the English speaker is a Czech person speaking English only, and it's an assistant in the classroom. So does some small presentation, small language presentation, and also speaks English with the children during transition times. For the 6 to 12 enrichment model, I put it in quotes because it's not exactly, but we're aspiring to reach that level. And we have curriculum that's taught in Czech, English as a foreign language, aiming again at the BICS. And we for the 12 to 15, for the adolescents, pretty much there's a system as a the way we have it set up, English as a foreign language, and they have to add a third language. Again, that's a state law. So they have, by the end of adolescence, they are exposed to 2 foreign languages, and of course they're studying Czech. The reason why I put EFL for the adolescents is that the English is not necessarily embedded into the curriculum. There are 2 reasons: that the program is 4 years old. This year we had the first graduates, so we are also learning how to set it up. But this year we've experimented a little bit, and we added CLIL lessons, which turned out to be a great success. The children, the students, I can say loved it, because we got the feedback from them that they really enjoyed it. And there were always 2 of us teaching, 1 for the language and 1 for the subject. It was integrating the content. Okay. So that was the school level. And at the children's level, my colleague Kavita Dudnot identified 7 types of language learners at our school. Don't worry, we will not go through all the options, but it was very interesting to see this list, because we do have children from all these 7 groups, and they can be as diverse as number 7 and number 1. So we have these children at school, and we are trying to create the best learning environment for them all. So here it's all the contexts combined. And so for this context, now I will share what has worked for us, or what has been working for me in the classroom. So what was my way to the learning materials? These images I drew actually 4 years ago, when we started, when we were creating the adolescent program. And when we planted the seed, and actually the first year after the students leave, that's when we feel that we have the first kind of fruit, because we've gone through the whole process. We know what the end product is, or what we need to bring the students to. And when I was going through my notes preparing for this presentation, I realized this is actually me in the context of creating learning materials, because this year is my 5th year at the school. And last year there were first fruit on the tree in terms of the materials, that it took me 4 years to get to the stage where I said, whatever I create, the children are using and is useful for them. And to be a little more specific, but at the same time not too long, not to take too much time. So my way to the learning materials. In September 2018, I entered the classroom, and as much as I've known about Montessori, I learned about Montessori in the year 2010. Surprisingly, when my first child was born. This is probably what happens for many of us. So I was entering the classroom knowing some, I would say quite a bit about Montessori, but definitely not as much as I do now. And the first shock to me was, how can I prepare learning materials for a 6-year-old absolute beginner that should work on his or her own with the materials on the shelf. So that was my first wake-up moment. This is going to be a ride and a challenge at the same time. What was the biggest thing, or what I was worried about the most, was the fossilization of mistakes. This is when the children are using, for example, Chinglish. We're using the Czech term and kind of twist and tweak it, make it sound a little English. And when if they used it on their own, they would this mistake would fossilize, and they would have hard time getting rid of it. Then I attended the assistant courses, which definitely helped me to see the road for bilingual Montessori much more clearly. And a big step, but definitely not the biggest one yet, came when the lead guides in the classrooms where I worked asked me to make more 3-part cards for the shelf. So that was my first kind of invitation to create something for the shelf. But at the same time, I was literally paralyzed by the perfectionism, and I don't mean it in a bad way at all, and the history of the Montessori language materials, because I was thinking, how can I create something and put it on the shelf that would be, I don't know, 2 days old compared to materials that is 100 years old, and the whole system is so well thought out. As I was preparing materials that the children worked with during the presentation, of course, the lead guys were observing me in the classroom, and I was slowly gaining their trust, and they were learning about how I approached the language. So I was not the one who would want to go against the Montessori principles, but I felt very strongly that, especially in the situation where we have English as a foreign language in the classroom, that the Montessori language materials are not developed for the needs of these children. And then it happened, a breaking moment. One of the lead guides in the classroom one day told me, put the materials you use during the presentations on the shelf. And I cannot even describe the feelings that day. It was as if I won the Oscars. I know it is funny, but remembering Romali's talk last week, I know I'm not the only one who had this feeling.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the last 4 points on my way to learning materials, as I was allowed to put my learning materials on the shelf, I was observing the children, and I observed that they just do not use the 3-part cards independently. And I was trying to figure out why is that. And the eureka came that there's a difference between teaching and learning materials. We will discuss that more today, but this was really the moment when I felt that I'm starting to have firm ground under my feet. And a new opportunity opened up for me. So yes, there's a difference between teaching and learning materials, and I can provide this to the children. But then kind of like the backslash for me was we have all the materials in the Montessori setting are so perfectly done. Everything is just top. And how can I overcome that? And allowing myself to experiment was, I guess, the biggest challenge for me. But I did try that, and trying it once, I realized that even if I experiment, it does not harm the children, because that was my biggest worry, that, you know, I'm kind of trying something out on the kids, and if it doesn't work out, you know, I will harm them in some way. And what I've observed, that that's not the case.
Right. Yeah, it's very common.
And nowadays, I see children using the learning materials independently, and there is, like, professionally nothing better than my colleagues, the lead guys, sending me photos or videos of children using the materials independently when I'm not there. So this was my way, and we will start digging deeper. And the first will be the difference between teaching and learning materials. This is, on one hand, my definition. I'm not saying I haven't had the opportunity to look into some research, but I looked only a little bit, and then I realized that this differentiation works for me, and I don't necessarily need like the research behind it or some facts, because just describing it just started off a new new era for me. So the way I differentiate between the two, the teaching materials are used during presentation, and the key is that the adult is the bearer of the activity and its structure. Thus, the teaching material can be very simple. For example, 3-part cards, picture or word cards, different figures or objects from the classroom. But the learning materials are used independently by the children. In other words, are the materials that are left on the shelf. And because the adult is not there, there must be a structure that's built in to substitute the adult's guidance. And this was the main, I mean, talking about in more detail about the realization that there's a difference between teaching and learning materials. It was exactly this, that the learning materials must have some structure that's built in. And this will be more inviting for the children to use the material. For example, board games, discussion cards, creating, writing tasks, and I will show you some examples later on. And before we go any further, I just would like to mention the word games. What do I understand with the word games? Because the word games is not necessarily very, I would say, welcome in the Montessori context, because it usually means winning or losing. I use the word games kind of synonymous for activities that have no winners, no losers, but are used or are built upon some gaming principles. And not to create any more confusion, if I used board activities, it's just, I don't know, pulls my ear, sounds very strange to me. So the games are not necessarily games winning and losing, but it's about the principles. And what's very important, that the teaching and learning materials are interconnected, they overlap, and one material can be used as a teaching material and as a learning material. So, but knowing when am I using what material in what context helps me to use it properly.
Yeah, and I think what you're describing is probably something that other people like you who went from teaching in a more traditional context to teaching in a Montessori context probably have gone through, because what you're describing is exactly what you said, that the material, the learning material has to have some element that allows the child to go back and use it on their own independently.
And one example for all, for example, this was with our 6-year-olds, like pre-A1 beginners, that we had different types of clothing. And during the presentation, I was either at the beginning, I was telling them what their figure should wear, and then they were telling each other. But in order to put it on the shelf, I created these guides or guidelines for them, that they did not have to think about what I want the other person to put for, like, to dress the figure in, but they were just following the colors and the symbols. And this way also they practiced all the vocabulary I wanted them to practice. So they wouldn't say like, okay, please put a yellow t-shirt on, red t-shirt on, they would be using only the words that they know. And this way they were using them all. So the difference between the teaching material and the learning material is only this strap or the instruction, how what to say and how to work with that. And as I mentioned, that they can be, the same material can be used both ways. And also important for me to mention is that whenever or before I put any learning materials on the shelf, it is a teaching material because we do it during the presentation. So I use it in the presentation, we practice it, and then when it's put on the shelf, it stays as the learning material. And unless we review, we're not necessarily going back to it with the group.
Mm-hmm.
Just another set of examples for the teaching materials, just color pencils when we were practicing colors, where we were telling each other the order. So each of us had different set of color pencils, and then we were checking whether the order matches.
Mm-hmm.
Some flashcards, number cards, and as opposed to that learning materials. Here, this is an example, like this white strip is an example of a communication card or card for inducing communication. This is a system I've been trying to use, I've been using with the children, and I've been developing it for them, for the non-readers. Again, and there we could go for 2 hours, explaining why we don't have, for example, the first graders read in English. We have reasons for that, and maybe that's for another community conversation. But they know the symbols. So, do you like bananas? So they have set, I don't know, 20 or 30 strips, like, do you like bananas? Do you like apples? Do you like monkeys? And they keep asking each other and answering. And I've observed that for the lexis or phrases practicing, this is, I found it very helpful, and the children actually enjoy using it. So sometimes they would take the stack and they would go around the classroom asking their classmates, so do you like bananas? And then they would go to someone else, and do you like pears? So it gave the weaker students the opportunity to practice speaking. And important, how to use the learning materials. We have very simple rules. The first one, that the material can be used by minimum 2 and a maximum 4 children. The reason why there is a minimum number is that we want the children to speak to someone and get help from each other. And the maximum 4 just for the sake of the activity being effective. You can use the presentation if you had the, you can use the material if you had the given presentation. Very simple rule aligned with the Montessori principles in the classroom. There is no winning or losing. When we talk about the gaming principle or game-based learning, what I do is I always try to take the game, the losing and winning aspect out of the game. The good thing is that when I say, oh, let's play tic-tac-toe, they all know the principles, how to play this game. But then I introduce them a way where there are no people winners or people losers, that we're not playing against each other. And it always takes, I don't know, 2 to 3 months for the new children to accept that even though we play tic-tac-toe in the classroom, it's not the same, it doesn't follow the same rules as outside. And if they are not able to accept that, I just take the material away. I'm not using it for some time, wait for them to grow a little older for the children, and then bring it back into the classroom and then start using it. So this is definitely a key aspect. And the children know that they can create new versions of the activity, but the rules above must be followed. And as preparing this presentation, I realized that number 5, you must speak English using the materials, is not part of the general classroom rules, but I realized we've never had a need for that. But I added it here because I can imagine in some classrooms, this may be an issue, that the children want to use the material, but refuse to use it in the L2. So I just added number 5 for this presentation, but we don't need that rule in our classrooms.
Mhm.
Okay, let's go. Now, guiding principles when I rely on creating learning materials. This will be a really just a breeze through the principles that help me in the process of creating the materials. Of course, it's the work of Maria Montessori herself, first and foremost. But then I found Angeline Lillard's principles of Montessori education just put in different words in a different context that helped me to kind of tick off the context whether the material fits the Montessori principles. Next one, Bloom's taxonomy. It's actually a quite old educational classification of learning objectives, but it was revised in year 2010, I believe. So the principle is that there is a certain order of cognitive work and we cannot skip around. So I know it may seem obvious, but when creating a material that there are things that sometimes it slips my mind. Well, not now, but it used to slip my mind that I need to really make sure in order when I want them to analyze something that they must be able to apply it first. So just to align that the right way. Of course, the CEFR, the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, it's not only about the lists of vocabulary for me, but also the descriptors of skills that children should be acquiring or learning for their appropriate level. And creating the English curriculum at our school, the Common European Framework of Reference is the guide for us that especially when parents come and say, well, you're not using any course books, so how do you know that you cover everything? So show them, we show them how we have it structured, that we don't necessarily have to go from chapter to chapter, but based on the child's interest or the group interest, we kind of go around, but in the 3 or 5 year span that they cover everything they should know.
Right. And I think it is very helpful to have this external reference that's very well recognized and known, at least throughout Europe. So yeah, I definitely recommend having an external reference like that for your standards and objectives.
And it's not only very helpful for us, for the guides and for the staff at school, but communicating with parents when we mention this and we say, your child is working towards the A1 level or B1, whatever level it is, that they usually have their own personal experience going through the tests and certifications for the different levels. So suddenly I know what you're talking about. So, and it's made relevant to them because they do have that experience, or most of them do.
Yeah.
And last principle is scaffolding. It's an term that's in the educational context, of course, means something else than in the building or civic engineering, constructing buildings, when you have the scaffold, all the ladders and all the support from the outside. But the description of scaffolding is scaffolding are the steps taken to reduce the degrees of freedom in carrying out some tasks so the child can concentrate on the difficult skill she is in the process of acquiring. And this principle of scaffolding is key for creating the learning materials for our classrooms, is because the children on one hand don't necessarily have such a good command of English yet, and at the same time the adult is not present. So the scaffold is there instead of the adult. It's pretty much the structure. And also the scaffold can be taken away from the learning material. For example, as I showed you the example of the strip for practicing the clothing, like dressing the figures, that if that strip is taken away, the scaffold was taken away, so it can be used for more advanced students as well. And this flexibility for me satisfied the requirement. I was told many times that the Montessori materials must be usable in more than one way for more than one purpose. So kind of, again, everything kind of combined together, just clicks. And now we're going to a more practical part. I prepared a sample sequence on one topic, and Mary Kay was kind enough to be my partner at crime when we demonstrate this. When I start some sort of a topic, I always introduce it to the children in one of the 5 following ways. Either we read a book where either the vocabulary or the grammar point is very frequent. We sing a song, again, where the vocabulary is present or the grammar point is present. Read a poem or rhyme. Children going out and bringing new information into the classroom. For example, it was in November, the children, the lower elementary, went on were exploring wildlife animals in Prague, and there were animals such as marten and jay, and these animals we see around all the time, but for example the parents had no clue how to say marten in English, how to say jay in English, and they were like, why are you learning such strange animals, you know, cat, dog, mouse? But in order to combine the Czech curriculum with the English curriculums, that this going out was very inspirational the children said, oh, we want to work more on the animals even during English. So that's why I chose these animals. And last but not least are the children's interests, because some children are fond of something or are very good at something. And as they bring it in, then I create sequence around that topic. So for today's presentation, I chose a sequence on adjectives. I've done this sequence with our 9-year-olds. Sequence on adjectives, we read, actually it was the 9-year-olds and also the 8-year-olds, so I chose an appropriate book. We read the book and there were adjectives there, so we were kind of discovering them. And after reading the book, we did this activity where the children closed their eyes. I gave an object into their hands and put a blanket over it so they could feel it only. And because today it's not only about the sequence, the activities, I also would like to show you how I present it. And so now Mary Kay and I imagine we are there sitting around the table where we have some objects in our hands, and I'm the L2 guide, and Mary Kay was kind enough to be the student. And the way I would do the activity is like this. I have something in my hand that's quite heavy but small. How about you, Mary Kay?
I have something in my hand that's very hard and smooth.
When you say hard, actually mine is very hard too, but has kind of smooth edges.
Mine has one pointy end and one curved end.
And can you tell if your object is smooth?
Very smooth, yes.
Oh, so it means that it's not rough.
No, it's not rough. No.
Oh, Okay. And because you cannot see what it is, could you try to guess what it is?
Maybe a ruler.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Super. So now let's take the blanket off and we can show the objects which we had. Uh-huh. So you have some sort of is it
It's a letter opener.
Oh, a letter opener. Okay. I thought it was a file, like nail file. And I have this object, which, to be honest, I don't know personally what it is. It's some device my husband uses for cutting some wires or something.
Okay.
Okay. End of the demonstration. Thank you, Mary Kay, very much.
Thank you.
Here's an example or picture of objects I gave to the children. I purposefully did not give them objects they could guess what it is, pen, pencil, or anything like that. Because what would happen, they would say, oh, it's a pencil, and they would have no need describing it. So I gave them very strange objects. And when I introduce an activity, first is I do it, I don't tell. In other words, I don't give instructions such as, okay, now you have something in your hands, and can you please think about how you could describe it, and so on and so on. I just go and do it, and the children pretty much follow my example. And I lead the activity long enough until I see that the participants know, all the children know the vocabulary or the principle of the activity. And at that moment, I step back. So instead of me asking the questions, kind of leading it, I say, now it's you only. And they keep asking each other. Mm-hmm. And as I step back, I observe, which is very important. And we will talk about it more if we have the time, because the observation, the ideas are kind of coming up as the children are using it. And sometimes they say, oh, and maybe we could use it this way. And collecting all this information makes me not to forget any of that.
And speaking of time, we do need to be mindful of time.
Mm-hmm. Yes, okay. I have my watch here. But going back to our sequence, so read a book. We use the blankets activity, which is a way of assessing how many adjectives the children know, how much they've forgotten, and whether they understand what's their passive knowledge. So if I said, is it smooth or is it rough? So if they say, I don't know, I would know that I don't understand. So this was a way for me how to assess it. The next activity would be some work with some cards, either, 3-part cards, which can be the pictures only, the word only, but I always start with the pictures. So the principles of the Kim's games, when we have the cards laid out and we keep saying small, big, dry, strong, hot, and then I would turn one card over, and then we would keep saying, we would have to remember what word is the one card that's face down. So that's one example. I can ask the children, where is strong? So they would point out the same activity, but the children keep asking each other. So one child uses the language actively, the one that's asking, the other one passively. So this way they reinforce their learning curve. Then can combine the flashcards, for example, with numbers. And I can ask, what is number 7? So this way we're kind of connecting different vocabulary areas. So they will say, oh, that's big. So either first I would say, then the children ask each other, or the other way around, what number is strong? So they would say 4. So different activities with that, which allows them to practice the old vocabulary and learn some new, because I would always put in kind of sneak in new vocabulary. Practicing for kind of like a speed, faster part. It's those are cards that are what I call the flip cards. They're two-sided, and the other picture is printed upside down. So when you have the stack, you just take it and you flip it, and it's really fast for the children to practice the pairs. And what's important to note, this is not about racing, that when we do it in a group, that all of us are focused and we take turns. And they also sometimes do it in pairs when they want to make sure that they understand it really thoroughly. Now we're getting to the board games part, where the structure is given by the board, as opposed to having loose cards on the shelf. This board gives them a structure, and the principle is very simple, that there are 6 color figures. And then there is a dice with color dots on it. So whenever you roll, for example, let's look here at the bigger picture, like purple. So you move 1. So you say heart, and you have to come up with the opposite. Okay. So you would have to say soft, and the support is built in that the opposite is somewhere on the board. So if you don't know it right away, you can find the answer, or you or the children and their teammates can find it. So this would be one example. This was the first time I tried a group task, and I was actually thrilled how it turned out. And the instructions were, I created my own sample. My own book is the principle. When you have the A4 paper, you fold it and cut it, and you make it into a small booklet. So I showed them my book. I read it. Now I told them, you will make your own book. When you use an adjective, mark it on the list. As a group, you must use all the adjectives. So here you can see the list, and they are marking the adjectives. So they created books, which we read together. My snail is slow, my snail is hungry. Here we have the rainbow, which is new and beautiful. And not only they enjoyed working together as a team, they said, oh, we forgot hungry. So who can use the hungry? So there was more communication going on. And also this activity has become very popular as the shelf activity, because they knew how to do it, and they created their own books. So here are all the materials for the which I used for this sequence. But very important to mention here is that whenever I create a sequence, it does not mean that the sequence is set. I can tell that I never carry out the sequence the way I plan it, because I always react to the situations that come up, the needs of the children. So this, I know there were many other possibilities how to go about it. And but this was just one example for all. Here, teaching and learning materials for me are like Venn diagrams when they overlap. And the size of the overlapping part very much depends on the language level the children have. Because the higher level of English, the bigger the overlapping. In other words, the more teaching material can be put on the shelf without the scaffold, without the support. And how do I know that the materials are effective? This will be a breeze through a topic of assessment, where assessment, there is a reason why it's underlined 3 times. And if you want to try to think about why that could be. But before we get to the 3 different ways of assessing, I thought it's very important to differentiate between assessment and evaluation, where assessment is ongoing and individualized and provides feedback, as opposed to evaluation is usually applied against some standards. And I find that some people see assessment as evaluation, but it's not that case. And of course, there's an overlap that both use criteria to measure this, to quantify the findings. And in terms of the assessment, I love this linguistic, this works for English. In Czech, we have different terms for each of them, but assessment for learning, as learning, and of learning. And this is why the I assess was underlined 3 times, because assessment for learning, that's assessment right after the session, where the learner and the adult share their feelings. Learning as, assessment as learning, that's the self-evaluation by the learner. What did you learn today? How do you feel comfortable about it? And what do you need to continue practicing? I never ask, what did you not know? I always ask, how many did you get right? And this is what you can build upon. And of course, assessment of learning, which is performance-based. And I created my own way how to do this type of assessment, actually in a way where the children really beg me to do it more often. And it takes some time to prepare it. And also it's not something that we want to work with the paper that much, but once a month we have so-called challenges. And I was inspired to create them based on Dylan Williams' 3 color tests. And the principle is that the children do some work. I provide them with the answers. They take a different color pen or pencil. They go through the right answers and correct their own work. And the 3rd color is that when they turn it into me, then I go through it with them, and then there can be some things they have overlooked or missed. So this way, they are the ones that are evaluating themselves. They say, oh, now I know why I got this wrong, because, and it's information for them. I learned it, or I need to still need work on it. So that was for the assessment, and we're getting to the last part. And this part will also be at the in the handouts Mary Kay mentioned, that assessing on one hand is very important, but equally important is to do something with the information. Therefore, I must reflect. And I created a very short and for me, very handy reflective cycle. I mean, there are many different models, but this one works for me. So first, I create a version 1.0 of the learning material. I introduce it to the children. I observe children's reactions. I assess the learning. I reflect and write down the notes. I incorporate the findings, and I create version 2.0. How long is one cycle? That was a very interesting question Mary Kay asked me when I was sharing the presentation with her before this talk. And actually it can be from 1 day to 1 month, or even like 1 hour to another. When I use a material and use it with different groups, I realize, oh, I did not think of this. So I can create the version 2.0 right away. Or it can be like from year to year when I start using the material, and when I start using the material again. So it's pretty much never ending, this cycle. So sometimes it gets to version 7.0. Doesn't mean that the first one was necessarily bad, but improving, there has been improvement. So in terms of wrapping up, what you will get in your email are 2 A4 pages, and here is just a sneak preview. One talks about the guiding questions for creating L2 learning materials, and I divided the questions into 3 parts: the who, the content, and the format of the activity. And here I just would like to mention the gaming principle. What do I mean by that? The gaming principle is, as I mentioned, the tic-tac-toe. Take a principle that the children know, adjust it to the setting that it works. and you don't necessarily have to be reinventing the wheel. So that's what I mean by the gaming principle. And the second page is contains my reflective cycle and the questions which I use to reflect daily or weekly, and then monthly. And I know this is a very big topic, maybe worth of another talk, but this is just, I felt that it's very important for you to have this information. And 3 sets of concluding words: keep trying, don't be afraid to experiment. Each school has its unique context, and thus it needs unique learning materials. And last but not least, follow the children. They will lead you. And maybe I will add, and they will not necessarily suffer because you're experimenting. They will learn along the way too. So thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. And
thank you, Lucie. I'm sure many of the people watching and people who will watch later will be very appreciative of you kind of breaking down your process, so that they can kind of apply what registers, what resonates with them in their own work. So now we'll just take a minute and look at the questions in the chat. And so first one is from Birgitta. I would love to hear more about changing classic game formats to games without winners or losers.
One example for all that comes to my mind, for example, tic-tac-toe, where I have a board where there, for example, different times, like when we're learning time telling, and it's not one playing against the other, but we have different color pebbles, and we line them up. So the children take turns as we go around. So there is always a card with a question. So for example, either it's like a full question or it's just written out 2:15. So one person reads it and the other person takes the first pebble that is there and places it. The next one takes another card, reads 7:30. The other one places it, and the principle is that the colors are lined up, they alter. That's one element of chance that's added to it. And the second one is that there are the cards where they are reading and telling where to place it. So at the end, they're always thrilled to find out which color won, because then we count if we play connect 4 or connect 3. So we count, let's say the green pebbles had 3 triples and the black one had 2. So this is one example for all, that how to take a principle of an activity they know well, but take the human winners or losers away. And pretty much the general rule would be add an element of chance, that the children are not choosing where to place the pebbles, but the cards determine that. I don't know if that was clear.
Yeah, it sounds like in that case, the pebbles win. One of the colors wins.
Yes, but it's not.
It's like an added dimension in terms of the players. It's not one of the players, but yeah, I think I get the idea. I love the principle. Yeah.
Thank you. And yes, there are winners, losers, but it's not the people, it's not the children. It's the color. Yes.
And it could be perhaps another idea. It could be like the group playing against time. That could be another principle. So as a group, they have to work together. So I think a lot of the modern board games, there are quite a few that have these ideas of not playing against each other, but playing as a team.
Yes, definitely. And Birgitta, what you just mentioned, that there's actually a field of study in the educational area where they talk about gamification or game-based learning or game elements in education. Yes, there are quite a few that are going for the computer digital type of gaming, but at the same time, as you mentioned, the modern board games, that's definitely a huge inspiration for me. And yes, adding the time elements. And this is something that I want to go more into, creating some checklists, so that would help me to be even more effective and efficient in creating the materials.
Yeah.
So one thing I just want to mention to everyone, which I don't know if we made clear enough towards the beginning of the talk, but Lucie in this talk is primarily referring to work that she's been doing with lower elementary age children. So like she mentioned, children who aren't yet reading in English, and children who are a bit younger. Someone asked, are the presentations given in whole group, small group, or individually?
They're given in small groups where I group the children based on their knowledge level, the level of their English. And so they have pretty much set groups between usually 4 or 5 children. And sometimes I group some, like have 2 groups together, but most of the time they work in their own groups.
Okay.
And the groups are not necessarily set for the whole year, because it happens that really like the learning of the children is not linear, that suddenly they come back after Christmas and they made a huge jump and leap, so they go to a different group that fits exactly their level. So it's not fixed for the whole year, but it's based on the good assessment. I can move them around.
Someone else asked, how is the English teacher organized for 6+ years, like 6 to 12, let's just say. If they're floating, if someone's floating between different classrooms, and I know there's as many ways to do this as you can think of, but do you want to just explain how it is right now in Andilek where you're working?
At Andilek, we have 2 elementary classrooms. I'm in one of them where I spend 2.5 hours every day, and I work with all the children every day. And in the other classroom, there is my colleague who used to be ESL teacher, and she took the 6 to 12 diploma course. So she is in that classroom the whole day, taking care of the ESL and Montessori curriculum presentations, or Montessori presentations in English with the older children. Because the classroom I work in right now is lower elementary only, and it will be kind of growing as we go now to 6 to 12. So next year I will work with the upper elementary, but I worked with the upper elementary 3 years for the previous 3 years. So the fact that this year I work in lower elementary only does not mean that I haven't worked in the full elementary age range.
Yeah, and I think the important thing for people to understand is that there's no one right answer. I mean, schools are always adapting their teachers to the children they have and the needs of the schedule. So that's something that's very much determined by other external circumstances, in my experience.
Yes. And not only adapting, but also evolving. And this is what I see at our school, that we've definitely, like over the last 5 years, I mean, when I look back, what we agreed on doing 5 years ago, and we rethought how, great solution it is, that half a year later, we realized that this is probably not the best way, and we changed it, so the adaptation is definitely one aspect, and the learning curve is another.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the rest are just comments. Someone says that her trainer emphasized games, reminding them that they must enjoy games and teaching. This is in 3 to 6, different games you have. Distant matching, the detective game. Someone else said, I love the activities. It's a challenge for us to produce them, but thank you for the inspiration. So your goal was
Thank you.
accomplished. And someone else said it's all about the prepared environment / teacher and reflections. Thanks so much, Lucie. I love your style.
Thank you.
And one more comment is someone mentioned the game called Outfoxed. It's great for practicing closing and accessory vocabulary. The student wins or the fox wins.
Okay.
Something to look at.
Thank you for the inspiration. I've never heard of it, but thank you. I'll definitely look into it.
So I think for now, I don't see any more questions, which is right about on time. We can start wrapping up. But thank you so much again, Lucie. I like I said, this is going to be valuable to so many people over time. So it's great that you put this together and you shared what you've learned over these years.
Thank you for the opportunity.
And now we will shift to, if you've been with us before, you know that at the end of each talk, we like to do what is a Menti. It's a website called menti.com. And it gives you an opportunity to share your aha moment from today's talk. Kind of don't think about it too hard, but just what will you take away, one idea that you'll take away from today's talk. So you have two options. You can go to the website menti.com and manually enter the code that's listed here. Or if you're sitting near a computer, you can use the QR code. Whatever's easier for you. And then we will wait and see what your takeaways are from today's talk. It's helpful for us as a team, and obviously it's very helpful for the speaker. Reflective cycle and material development, right? There's a tendency to think once it's on the shelf, that's it. But no, we can keep reviewing and improving. Montessori material can be used in more than one way, absolutely. Someone is going through the same thought process as me. Kindred spirits. The difference between teaching and learning materials, I think that's very important. It's like an important conceptual difference to help teachers actually think about the purpose of material they have. To keep on creating and that I'm not alone, yay. I really like teaching versus learning material. I never saw it that way. It will help me build better material. How to adapt teaching materials and create learning materials, and how learning materials can be scaffolded and in a structured way to ensure adequate, thorough, precise ESL vocabulary. That's great. Thank you, everyone. And you can keep answering. It will stay open, and we'll collect all the answers at the end. But we do have, since it's our last talk for the season, so to speak, we did also want to just give you a chance to share if there are particular topics that you would like to see in future community conversations. Just to get a sense what might be on your mind that maybe we haven't, well, I know there's many things we haven't talked about, but just to see what's on your mind. I guess people need time to think about this question. It's a big one, I suppose. I see someone put in the chat that they would love to see something about 0 to 3 bilingual environments. Yeah, that's definitely on our list. Well, you can, as I always say, you can always email us at hello@bilingualmontessori.com, any ideas and suggestions. And we'll look forward to, as I said, we'll be reminding you via social media this summer to go back and listen or re-listen to talks that maybe you didn't hear or you want to hear again. And then we'll let you know in September when we'll be getting started again and the schedule of speakers. So once again, thank you to Lucie, thank you to Plemena and Amy behind the scenes, making this all work. And I wish everyone a very happy evening.